Ayo, back at it again with another video. Thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. So, I've kind of wanted to make this video for a while. UConn, I definitely think deserves to be part of your Power 4 conferences. I don't see the Big Ten or the SEC interested in it in UConn. So the only other options I would assume is the Big 12 and the ACC. So I think either conference would be a great fit for UConn. Geographically, it would make more sense for the ACC, but the Big 12 has emerged as a very, very good basketball conference. If you look at the Big 12, it's mostly across middle of the country, middle America. You have a lot of schools that are kind of on the East Coast. You got Cincinnati, West Virginia, UCF, but mostly kind of concentrated in Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and the Four Corner schools. So, in terms of regionality, I think it would be a better fit for the ACC. You have, depends on how the next cycle of realignment goes, conference expansion, conference contraction. If you're the ACC, you're probably losing 2 to 4 schools. Florida State and Clemson want out. There's been rumblings that North Carolina wants to go to the SEC. That kind of is a domino effect. I think UConn geographically fits better in the ACC. You have 2 schools there. You got Boston College, you got Syracuse. Even Pitt as a third school is pretty close there. You kind of have a bunch of schools up here. But it all depends on how many members of the ACC leave next cycle. We know how the Pac-12 collapsed. We didn't. I didn't anticipate it to be that severe of a collapse. You had 12 members, and then you had the announcement after Texas and Oklahoma left the Big 12 for the SEC that UCLA and USC was going to the Big 10, and that led to a domino effect of Washington and Oregon going to the Big 10, the Four Corner schools going to the Big 12, and then Cal and Stanford to the ACC. So it all depends on how severe the ACC collapses. I think for the UConn, I think they fit geographically better in the ACC. If you have the ACC and then you have a lot of these premier basketball brands, especially Duke, depending on what North Carolina does, there's rumors that they want to go to the SEC, but I don't know how interested the SEC is, considering the fact that North Carolina is not great at football. But then again, there's also the SEC expanding its footprint into the state of North Carolina, so there's a possibility I could see. Virginia, very good at basketball. You have Duke, very good at basketball. Virginia, depending on what North Carolina decides to do. Miami's decent at basketball. Syracuse is always pretty decent at basketball. Louisville, very solid. You add UConn to the ACC lineup, I think you could definitely have a lot of natural basketball rivalries. Syracuse, Louisville, Duke for sure, North Carolina if they stick around. But I think if you're the Big 12, I do think you kind of need to expand a little bit more on the eastern part of the country. Memphis wanted to join, I think a couple months ago. Very decent basketball program. If you're the Big 12, you're probably a landing spot for a lot of ACC teams, so maybe you can pull some teams from the ACC. You're definitely going to want to get up into the Northeast a little bit more to kind of fill out the map for Cincinnati and West Virginia. If you look at the Big 12, Iowa State's very good at basketball. Arizona's dominant this year at basketball. If you look across the Big 12, there's a lot of really premier basketball brands. Texas Tech, very, very solid this year. Houston, obviously, very, very solid. And then, unfortunately, they're kind of don't have a great track record in the playoffs, especially come tournament time. I thought they would be in the national title game, but they got bounced by Illinois in the Elite Eight, I believe. It was either the Elite Eight or the Sweet 16. But personally, I think UConn would fit geographically within the ACC. However, for this video, I think Big 12 would be very, very smart to add UConn as a member, because then that can get the Big 12 up into the Northeast. And again, if you're the ACC, you don't know how many teams are actually going to leave. You know, ACC would be a great idea for UConn geographically, but then again, it depends on how severe the collapse is. Are we talking only a handful of schools leaving, or are we talking like a Pac-12 exodus collapse? You know what I mean? So I would love to see UConn into either one of these power conferences. The football is not as great, but they have had some pretty decent seasons in football as of late. I think they were 9-7. No, not 9-7. I think they had 8 or 9 wins. So that was what, 9-3, 8-4, something like that. I don't know. I'm thinking of NFL scheduling with 9-7, not college football. But that's besides the point. So I think they would fit really well in the ACC. You could have some natural rivalries with Duke, with Syracuse. But it, again, depends on how severe the collapse is. Is a lot of ACC teams going to land in the Big 12? I think UConn would make a great fit in the Big 12, especially with all those very premium basketball brands: Houston, Arizona, Iowa State. You know, Texas Tech is a good program basketball-wise. Kansas State, Kansas as well, blue blood in terms of basketball. You know, you have all these brands. You know, do you have Arizona? Do you have Kansas? Do you have Houston, Iowa State, maybe UConn in conference? That's a lot of really, really solid basketball brands. UConn doesn't really bring a whole lot of football prowess and prominence to the Big 12, but then again, if you're the Big 12, you definitely got to try and expand up into the Northeast here a little bit more to kind of fill out the map, because Cincinnati and West Virginia are kind of on an island over here. They don't really have anybody close to them. The closest is Iowa State and Central Florida. So I think UConn would make a great fit in the Big 12, but I also think it would make geographic sense for the ACC. So I don't know. If I were the Big 12, I would definitely be very, very set on trying to get UConn into the conference, because in terms of expanding your footprint, expanding your basketball portfolio, it just makes a lot of sense. So with that, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Deuces.